What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Ardor and Grit Experience. I'm your host, Sean O'Malley. Our first guest on the show is Dave Thomas. Dave is an absolute legend in the world of running and owns the nickname the Man in Motion for a reason. Having trekked a recorded 120,000 plus miles and conquering over 800 races and 76 marathons in his career as a top-notch marathon and ultramarathon runner, Dave imparts his wisdom, philosophy, and mindset behind becoming an elite athlete and how living like a clock is a sure way system to achieving success. Dave also has over 30 years experience as an exercise scientist, coach, and mentor, working with top-of-the-line athletes from a multitude of different backgrounds. In this episode, we cover the fundamentals of running, what it takes to become an elite athlete, how to break through your mental wall, principles to recover and prepare for important events, and much more. Now, ladies and gentlemen, welcome Dave Thomas. What's up, Dave? How's it going?
Great.
All right. Provide us with your 30-second elevator pitch. Who are you? What are you about? And what's going on in your life?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. My name's Dave Thomas. Basically, have a long life as far as running goes. Got involved when I was 14 years old, in long distance running, and it kind of led me to a whole life of coaching, fundraising, my profession, in the health field, and to where we are today. Still at 66 years old, still staying in shape, still running, and still coaching here at Jefferson University, cross country, track and field.
Yeah, you're a freaking stud, man. Through the research I've been doing on you, you got a long laundry list of, or lived multiple lives so far. I read this one article about you through Thomas Jefferson, and they said they called you the Man in Motion. Just to cap off some of the highlights that I discovered on you.
Nice.
You've run a recorded over 120,000 miles and 800 races in your life, including 76 marathons with 17 consecutive Boston Marathon appearances. You've once run 133 and a half miles in 25 hours. You ran Philadelphia to Atlantic City, enjoyed a personal best time of 2 hours and 28 minutes and 54 seconds, the Chicago Marathon, which is absolutely incredible. You ran another 127 miles in the Run Around Philadelphia, which was a race that you came up with, right? Run Around Philadelphia? Or was
it wasn't a race, it was a charity run.
It was a charity run, and it was by yourself also, right?
By myself, yeah.
Incredible. All right, and you were the first ever American to finish in both the South African Comrades Marathon and the London to Brighton race, which were both 56 miles. So why running? Why did you choose to run?
Funny story. I mean, I thought I grew up in North Philadelphia, kind of rough part of the city. So obviously wasn't attuned to distance running. A lot of street games. You played all the street games. We didn't have organized sports then, really. So when I went to LaSalle High School, right outside of Philadelphia, my history teacher turned out to be an All-American runner from Villanova, who was on multiple national teams and very inspirational. Tom Donnelly was his name. Actually coached 45 years at Harvard College and just retired this year. So he was my history teacher and kind of like, to me, and I thought I was a sprinter. I was fast, but not that fast. So when I saw these guys leaving to go for these runs, I said, oh, where are they going? And he says, oh, they're distance runners. Oh, what's that? So that was my kind of first taste. And, 1-2 miles, you're holding your side. He never did it before. And coach gave me a program to follow in the summertime, came back for cross country, and, the rest was history. Basically gave me a bug when I was 14 years old and it's continued on to, many different things from that.
All right. So what were some aspects of advice or motivations that Coach Tom Donnelly, that he instilled in you to kind of persevere and take those leaps to running those exceptional marathons and miles?
Biggest thing is, don't quit. You're going to have good days. You're going to have bad days. But if you have your vision of what, where you want to be, a goal, and you pursue it, keep going towards that, you'll eventually, get there. You may have some not quite reach as high as you want to be, but, as that old saying goes, set your sights for the stars, maybe hit the moon. So that was the biggest thing that Coach Donnelly inspired in me was just, keep going. I'm 5'3", I was 110 pounds, so I wasn't a big guy. So I knew, I knew I wasn't going to be a basketball player. I knew I wasn't going to be a football player. So I knew distance running was kind of like I loved going out for long runs, and I was pretty good at it. So, stuck with it.
All right, yeah, I saw you talked about for beginners in order to introduce themselves to the sport. You talked about the low and slow pace to kind of get into the momentum and push yourself a little bit and then build your progression up to finding that pace to compete.
Yeah, I mean, God gives us so many talents, and so we have so much speed. But the great thing about distance running, it's an endurance sport. So no matter what our pure God given speed is, we can always build off of that strength and build up our endurance. So you may not be as fast a miler as the next guy, but hey, if you keep doing miles and you keep doing distance, you'll eventually find the right distance for you as far as races go. That's the great thing about distance running. There's many different events. So that's the main thing is start first. Okay, what's my speed? What I can run maybe a 400 speed in, and then build up to what's going to be your best event. So I never God given 400 speed. To be a great miler, you got to break like 50 seconds, or 51 seconds, 400. I was 57 seconds was my best 400, right? So I knew I was never going to be a great miler and ever this, but I moved into the marathon, right? And then the marathon, okay, that was my ultimate thing. I says, okay, now I'm pretty good running longer stuff. So you eventually find what's your best thing.
When you were competing, putting your head in the mud and just going straight forward for those miles, I saw you lived your life through a philosophy called living like a clock.
Mm-hmm.
Do you mind defining living like a clock and how, when you were competing, that routine of living like a clock actually left an intrinsic or extrinsic impact on your performance?
Yeah, and I can't take credit for that. That comes from a great coach called Jumbo Elliott, who coached at Villanova. So it was actually passed down to Tom Donnelly, who passed it down to me, and I still use it today. But basically, what it is live like a clock is plan your day out. Plan your day out. So if you're a student athlete, which I tell my athletes, you have two big things to worry about. Worry about your schoolwork. Worry about your running. So plan your day out like living like a clock. So you get up at the same time, go to the bathroom at the same time, eat at the same time, train, go to class, run. So every day, every hour should kind of be laid out there. And if you could do that and stick with that day to day, take a day at a time, you're going to be successful. It's not just the one workout or the one hard day that does it all. It's the continuous, consistent training and living your life to that, improving. That's going to make you a successful person.
Definitely. You went to Temple University
Yeah.
for your undergrad and your graduate degree.
I never finished graduate degree, but I undergrad is Temple. Ran for
All
Temple
right.
also.
All right, in sports management and then in exercise science. So when you were at Temple, I saw that you had a class of project that you decided to commit to running 127 miles from St. Peter's and Paul's to connecting 17 different Philadelphia Catholic schools. And you were able to raise a whopping $5,000 for a charity. What was the assignment that you had to commit
Well,
to coming up with that idea? And what was going through your head when you were running those 127 miles?
well, again, I was undergrad. I did exercise physiology and all that kind of stuff. Graduate school, I figured, hey, let me get into more of the sports management end and that kind of stuff and that area. So our class was divided up into like a business. Whatever that class was, a sports management class. And my project was I was in charge of community affairs. So whatever community affairs are, right? So hey, I was distance runner at the time. I said, all right, let me take this challenge up. I was actually coaching LaSalle High School as an assistant coach at the time too, for track and field. So that was my connection with all the Catholic high schools in the city of Philadelphia. At the time, there was 18 of them. So I said, well, let me come up with a project for the community that can raise money for this, for something. It turned out to be St. Francis Inn, which was a homeless shelter in Kensington. Um, and do a project. So I laid out a map. It looked kind of simple on a map. Okay, it was 127 miles, starting and finishing at St. Peter Paul Cathedral, and running a route that connected all the Catholic high schools in the area. So you went as far north as Bishop Egan, which was in Levittown, as far over as Archbishop Wood in Warminster, as far south as St. James in Chester, and then back to Philadelphia. So found a route all connecting those schools. And the great thing was that the kids, the track kids at each high school, actually raised the money. So they raised the money for me. I was more like just the symbol. I was the guy running all these miles by myself, connecting them, and they were going to give me the money when I got to their school, with their coach. And then I finished back at where I started at the cathedral. So that was the project, pretty much in hand, a community service thing. And like you said, we raised about $5,000, and it was Christmas week. So I started on a Monday, 9 o'clock in the morning, and I finished the next day right around 1 o'clock p.m. The next day, was when I was done. So it was simple when I laid it out on a map, but it kind of got difficult because there were some parts where it was like a super highway or it was dark at night. So I had my volunteers kind of follow me along, and I basically did the route. So it was a challenge, but hey, I did it. It was tedious the last couple miles. You're on your feet for that many miles and that long a time. But I kept that mission in my head. Hey, it's for a project. We're raising money for this charity. They're going to be happy to see me at the end. And hey, I crossed the finish line at St. Peter Paul Cathedral. Went up and said a little prayer at the altar, and called it a day.
Was that your first ultra marathon, or what was your first ultra marathon?
No. The first time that was about my third or so. My first one was actually I started at the Coney-Palmyra Bridge, and I ran to Ocean City, New Jersey. So it was about 71 miles, and that was kind of a test to see if I could run this Philadelphia Atlantic City race. So I did that like a year ahead of time by myself. I had one guy follow me in a car. And we actually raised money that was the first fundraiser I did. That was for the American Heart Association. So people pledged money to me to do that. So that kind of led me into, doing the race at Philadelphia Atlantic City, which was actually a race. That was actually a race. And then the run around the city was a couple of years after that.
So when you were getting into these ultra marathons, people harp on the conditioning, and you also spoke about the routine of living life like a clock in order to prepare physically for these events. How are you also able to prepare between the ears, your mind, in order to persevere those extra miles, especially that extra 127 miles you were doing for a charity event? What was going on between your ears, and how were you able to mentally prepare yourself for an event like that?
I think the main thing is have your goal in your head. I had my goal in my head ahead of time of kind of what my pace was going to be, for what it was. And then it's going to hurt later on. After so many hours, you're just setting yourself up for that pain, and that just comes from day-to-day training, a year-to-year training. Like I said, I've done 76 marathons, so the pain of that marathon, it always hurts doing a 26-mile race, and it's going to come, at a certain time, and you just have to kind of bear down. And when it comes back to your training, like when it's raining out and snowing out, and it's terrible weather, and your friends are going somewhere, and you have to get the day going and get the training in. So I think it's just a gradual mental buildup from the physical pain that you put yourself through in your training that helps you when you have to perform, whatever the event is down the road. And having a mission involved, like, having, hey, you're raising money for whatever the charity is, that people are counting on you, so when people are counting on you, you don't want to give in, and you want to be successful, doing it.
Yeah, so keeping that why in between your mind is what really allows you to persevere forward.
Yeah.
So I don't want to knock anybody for this, but when I recently ran the Philadelphia Marathon, I realized that people their why seemed a little distorted. It was like, this is the best moment of my life for me finishing this race. And I'm like, what if this is the highlight of your life? What's next? Or what happened before this? What was your mindset when you were going out and competing in these marathons and you weren't sure of your why? Was it always self-directed, like this is a goal on my plate? Or did you have something extrinsic from yourself? Like, obviously you had those charities, but were you competing for somebody? Were you competing for your family? What was your why when you were competing? Especially in like those ultra marathons when you're the first American competing overseas in England and South Africa, you were the only guy out there. You did this all by yourself. So what was your reason for being out there?
Well, I'll correct you on that. I mean, I wasn't the first American that ran London to Brighton or Comrades. I was the first American to finish the race. First
Okay.
American that year when I competed. For that. So, so when I ran London to Brighton, I was competing against a couple hundred people. Comrades had 20,000 people in it. But to
Okay.
go back to your original point, my most of my runs were races. So you're competing. You've been a wrestler. It's one on one when you're running these big races. It's you against 20,000 other people. So you have to kind of know ahead of time. Hey, am I going to win this race? Is that the motivation? Well, obviously, from running the New York City Marathon, I'm not an elite runner at that level. I know I'm never going to win the thing, but I'm there to run a certain time, and do my thing. So that was my motivation. That's my why. So I said, hey, I'm in shape to run 2 hours and 25 minutes. That's my why. So I know every mile I have to run, 5:25 pace per mile if I'm going to achieve that. So that's what keeps me going. And you kind of have a metronome in your head. You kind of know what pace you're at and how you're competing in races. Now, when you're a small race, a local race where there's only 100 people, and you know that you're the best guy out there on the starting line, well, hey, when you're getting there, that's your why. I'm there to win the race. I'm there to achieve and win the race, and let them catch me. So for me, every race kind of had different purposes depending on the level of the race. Was it a world class race or was it a local race? When I got to London to Brighton, that was 56-mile race. So you started at Big Ben, the thing stroke 7, and that was the start. And you finished in a town kind of similar to Atlantic City, 56 miles away from London. So I knew I was the best, American. I knew I was in the top 20 in the race, going in by looking at the other people's times that they've run. And I eventually finished 11th. I finished 11th overall, and I was the first American. And I was running 7 minute per mile pace, for 56 miles with pretty good hills. So that was my why. That was my why. That was my motivation going. Okay, I'm in ninth place. I'm in 10th place, and you take it mile to mile. 56-mile race. Every mile you feel differently. You might feel terrible 1 mile, but you feel great another. So you have to just break it down mile to mile, and eventually you're getting close to the finish line, and then it becomes easier. It's that middle part of any race where you have to. It's that make or break of where you have to persevere and push through, and whether you're going to have a successful race or not a successful race.
Okay. So the common thread with a lot of people who are getting into running is hitting a wall.
Hmm.
When you were getting into those ultra marathons or just competing in your first marathon, what did your wall look like? What mile marker, and how were you able to persevere that through that wall so you could actually run to that finish line? Because when
Well,
I was running that marathon, that 18-mile marker whooped my butt. I was like, holy crap! I didn't even think. I was like talking to people beforehand, and they're like, yeah, you're gonna hit the wall at some point. And I'm like, I didn't screw the wall. Like I did Division I sports. I've hit walls, but I've been able to persevere through them pretty solidly. But can you define your wall?
well, and the marathon is any distancing is a couple of walls because reasons why you're hitting the wall. It could be a training issue, it could be a mental issue, or it could be a combination of both. So, give you a little history. Back then, the wall. Back then, like the only kind of goofy people ran the marathon back in the 1940s, 50s, 60s. It was a unique individual who ran that. Not nowadays where you have everybody out there. It's amazing. You have 20,000 people running this 26-mile race. So no one really ran more than, a lot of miles. So 20 miles was always thought to be the wall, the barrier type of thing. Okay, the race starts at 20 miles, and then the last 6 miles you're actually racing. And so there is a wall of that. Hey, you're running out of sugar, you're running out of energy. That physical wall where your body can only store so much glucose in its body, and boom, you hit that wall. Or it could be just mentally. Hey, I've been on my feet now for a couple hours, and bam, I'm hitting that mental kind of wall. That has to be broken by your training. So when I was training for the marathon, I got to a point where I was running 120 miles a week, 100 miles a week, 120 miles a week. So I'm running 5 miles in the morning. I'm going to work. I'm working all day. I come back and I'm running a 12-mile, workout, whatever the workout is. And I'm achieving that. You're not doing that all year, but you're doing that for maybe a 3-month period before you do your marathon. So you're training your body to get beyond that wall just there. And then you learn about it through science. You learn, like, back in our day, we didn't have Gatorade, or we didn't have all this stuff that you kind of take, gels, that kind of thing. So you had to kind of like go out there on your own experiment. So we used to shake up a bunch of Coke, right? You shake up some Coke, you defizz it, take the bubbles out of it. And that was your quote unquote Gatorade. You put that out there when your training runs, you do a 3-hour training run. And, every hour or so you drink some of that Coke and with some water. Well, that was archaic, you think now, but that was what we learned back then. So you did it through science, and then your training runs is what gets you through that mental wall. The more you can do that. You did your first marathon, right? My first marathon I did when I was 17 years old. So it was down in Philadelphia. I was a high school goofy kind of kid, but we were running 60 miles a week in high school. You know what I mean? So I was doing my marathon training in high school, but I still hit a wall. I hit that wall right around 18 miles because I was never out there, that kind of thing. And I dropped out. I dropped out my first marathon when I was like 23 miles. My calves were cramped up. It was a horrible day, and I didn't finish. But then the next marathon I did was a year later, and I did achieve it. I learned from that first mistake, that wall. I still hit a wall the second time, but I pushed through it, and I did pretty good for still being a high school kid.
Okay. So you've worked with countless athletes throughout your career, and you're coaching at Jefferson now. How do you coach people through persevering, like getting past their wall? Is it something like you talked about, it's within the training, but then you also talked about like the extrinsic factors, like your nutrition, your sleep, like what you're doing outside. Are you going out and partying, or are you like hunkering down and being committed to your training? How do you make sure people are on track to complete the race, complete in the time that they're expecting, generate higher results for themselves, and also push past those mental walls that they're facing for themselves?
Well, what I do, I sit down with each individual athlete, right? So I have a girls' team, and I have a men's team, and a women's team, and everyone has a goal. It's kind of, half. It could be a full goal, it could be just like a thought in their head type of thing. So my goal as a coach is I sit down individually with each one. We have a private 15, 20-minute talk before the season, and kind of go over, okay, what are your goals actually? And most of it's performance. And, obviously with running, it's all about times and place and stuff. So, hey, are you going to be the conference champion? Are you going to be going for national champion? Are you going to run this time? So they may come up with these pie in the sky ideas, which is great. And I always say, I never laugh at anyone's goal. So put down your goal. But then I tell them the work that they need to do to achieve that, and so it's a day-to-day thing, and it's a year-to-year thing to achieve that goal. So I think a lot of it is laying out what they need to do to get there. I've been running for 50 some years, so I know what they need, and then just giving them the confidence along the way to increase their mileage or increase their speed, or do their workouts that they have to do to eventually, when they get to race time, that they're prepared and they can go with that start line feeling confident that they've done the work, and they and they can achieve what they've eventually set out to do.
Taking it back a little bit, you've coached you coached Olympic gold medalist Meldrick Taylor. You've coached and trained some 76 and Flyers players. How are you able to run the same models you're currently doing with your athletes in the track and field and cross country realm? And how would you apply it with those other athletes, like the hockey players, the basketball players, and those fighters, with the same context of preparation and mentality and areas of improvement? How are you able to contextualize that for them?
It's funny, when I coached those NHL players and Meldrick Taylor, who was an Olympic and world champion boxer, I didn't know a lick about hockey. I'm not a hockey player, but I was their conditioning coach. So they were coming to me for conditioning advice, type of thing, away from what their actual sport was. So for hockey players, for example, they're very good as far as mental wise, they come in and they'll accept anything you say, even though you never skated, you never hockey. They know, they don't know about lifting weights, so they don't know what they have to run to get in shape and all that kind of off ice stuff. So I same thing. I would lay out their goals and what we have to achieve on this off season to put more weight on or increase your speed, the workouts they have to do. Same thing with Meldrick Taylor. He actually had to drop 20 pounds going into his actual boxing camp. So I had to convince him, hey, Meldrick, and boxers are a unique individual. They're kind of, out there. I had to convince them this is the work we have to do to achieve what you have to, get there. So I take that, there to my own athletes, right? Now I'm in my field. Now I'm in running. I'm in distance running. This is my field. And running is basically conditioning. I mean, if you're going to be a great track and field athlete, it's a skill, obviously running, but it's not the same type of skill you have in a hockey, or a team sport or, or even boxing type of thing. So I can very easily achieve that, carry the same conditioning wise to my runners and basically educate them on eating, sleeping, workouts, interval training, hill training, all the specific things they need that's going to, make them a faster runner. So I found it very, very enjoyable. It's going from $1 million athletes, then going down to amateur athletes, in my field. It's very, very easy to do that way.
Okay. And what
No
were
ego,
like
is what I'm
no
saying.
ego. That's a beautiful thing right there. So since you were working with those athletes, what were like the big proponent to their mentality? Because a runner's wall or a runner's mentality is a little bit different than that fighter or that hockey player or that basketball player's mentality. But what were some commonalities between all four of those categories? And what were some different value adds that each individual group had?
Well, I think the thing is with a professional athlete that's already at that level, they have obviously a great talent and they've been drafted and they've been chosen in the NHL, so they had to fight their way for the amateur ranks up to the pro ranks. So when they were seeing me in their career, they were already pretty well established. They were probably 23 years old, 22 years old, type of thing. So they were established in their hockey, realm. They knew what they needed to do. Same thing with the boxer, with Meldrick. When he saw me, he was already world champion. He had already done the ranks as far as he won his gold medal in the Olympics. He'd done all that kind of stuff. So they were just looking at that extra edge that they needed to, achieve their sport type of thing, their performance in their sport. Where when I'm dealing with my runners today, these kids are 18 years old. I mean, they're 17, 18 years old, and they're coming from high school. Some of them have a great program in high school. Some of them, actually one or two of them played soccer, and all of a sudden, they ran track but never ran cross country. So I'm basically teaching them. They don't know anything about that kind of thing. So I have to teach more in my college here with distance runners here with this level of athlete. Now, for example, if I was coaching an Olympic runner came to me, a distance runner came to me, and he's 25 years old, and he left his other coach, and he wants to maybe help me out with maybe some tips. That would be, something different than what I'm doing with what I'm doing in college now. It's just where I'm catching them at different touch of life. Whether I'm going to be a pure teacher, along the board, or am I just kind of like, bringing them to another level, type of thing.
Okay. You were still competing when you were coaching these professionals also, right?
Yeah, I competed till I was 40. Seriously, I competed till I was like 43 years old.
43? Okay. So what were some of the lessons that like through coaching these athletes that you started to put back and reflect on yourself with? Because I have a coaching company now, and what I find myself realizing is like I'll coach these dudes through the mental aspects of their game, and I find myself reflecting on my own mentality when these guys are kind of contextualizing how they're trying to pursue their goal or where they're trying to go with themselves. So did you have like a backseat check when you were talking through and helping these guys out? And did you have any realizations like, oh, this dude is persevering and figuring out this way, maybe this is how I could apply it to myself?
Um, Not really. I mean, at that age, when I was hitting that point in my life, Um, I was pretty well set on my routines, as far as like what I needed to do to prepare, that kind of thing. What I got from the guys that I work with though, hey, I was 42 at the time. They were 20 some. So I was double their age, you know what I mean? But what I like talking to them was everyone has a different story, you know what I mean? Like they all had different stories of where they want to go and where they came from, that kind of stuff. So I would say that helped inspire me, in my later part of my career, dealing with them in their beginning part of their career type of thing. It helped me push a couple extra years in there because I wanted to be their mentor too, like a lot of these hockey guys too. When they saw me run around the spectrum for 24 hours, right? I did that for the hockey, I did that for the Flyers Wives Hall of Fame when I ran around the spectrum and I ran from there. So they looked at little Dave here like, hey, he's 5'3", 115 pounds, where the hell I was. So they were actually inspired by me, saying, hey, he's achieving that. I better go out and bust my hump, when I'm lifting weights and doing this stuff for him. And I inspired, and I got energy from them too, because, hey, when you're getting over 40 years old, you need that little extra boot in the butt sometimes to get out the door and do your workouts because you've been doing it for so long. So it was kind of like a give and take thing. So it did help us both.
That's beautiful. You set the tone. You were able to ignite some energy within them, and they were also able to use their circumstance and help them out to bring it back on you for motivation.
Mm-hmm.
That's like one thing I found out really cool because you're the guy every single track and field meet or cross country meet show up in a collared shirt and a tie, right?
Well, I try not to do it every single time, but mostly championship time because I think I learned that a long time ago. It might have been Riley, the coach of the Lakers, or one of the guys. But it said, if you come dressed and you come dressed in style and you look good, you know, people are going to take you seriously. You know, you don't want to look like your runners. Like I always say, I don't want to go to a meet looking like, I'm wearing just a t-shirt and shorts, that kind of stuff. I don't look like I'm going to run. I'm going to look like, hey, I'm the guy in charge and I'm the guy setting the tone. So if you wear a suit and tie and hat, you look like you're going to church, and they're going to respect you more. I think than now. Other coaches have been successful, like Tom Donnelly, my coach. I was telling you about. He's a hell of a very successful coach, and he wears a Phillies hat, and he just kind of comes with whatever he wants to wear. Well, that's his thing. But for me, I always felt good, dressing up and looking the part.
I kind of take a similar mentality. You got to dress up for business. Um, and it's like when you look good, you feel good, you perform good. That was like a little bit of my aspect too. Is like
Yep.
I don't need to be dressed in a suit, but if I was sharp, I was able to think more focused and present myself and hold myself a little bit more accountable just because of my physical presentation. It wasn't that I was trying to live through my flesh. I was still living through my soul, presenting who I was authentically. But because I was able to set a precedent with my first impression, I was able to leave it a little bit different of an impact on individuals instead of just dressing up like a slot.
It's all about first impressions, right? Because a lot of people you never seen before, and you're coming there and you're presenting yourself. So that was always my philosophy too.
Yeah, so circling it back to you competing, you posted your personal best marathon at 2 hours and 28 minutes in the Chicago Marathon or the Boston Marathon?
No, Chicago.
Chicago. And then you ran your fastest mile pace 4 minutes and 29 seconds
I was back in high school.
back in the
So
back in high school.
I wasn't a miler.
All right. How were you able to achieve that pace and how long did it take you to achieve that pace? What were some of like the biggest adjustments you needed to make in order to enhance that time through your performance?
Well, the marathon was about my 11th marathon I ran or so, 11, 12, when I hit that time. Um, so it was a learning process. Like I said, that first one I dropped out of, I learned from that. And then, I dropped it down. So being a track athlete in college for Temple, I was running 10,000 meters, 5,000 meters. So, I had the speed workouts and speeds from that. So basically, I carried that on post college. I thought I'd be better at the marathon type of thing, my distance. So, that is roughly around 5 minutes and 35 seconds per mile, when you're running a 2:28. So, I had to get, when we're doing our workouts, like our intervals, a typical workout might be doing 6 times 1 mile at 5 minutes. You know what I mean? So you're running faster miles in your training intervals than you are in your actual race, for the marathon type of thing. So same philosophy too is when you're training for the mile and you want to run a 4:30, well, that's roughly about what's that 68 seconds per 400. So you got to train your 400 intervals faster than that. Train that back around 62 to 65, and you'll do anywhere from 12 to 16 of them. So you're gaining, you have the speed, but you're gaining the strength from that. So it's the same philosophy, whether it's a mile, marathon. When I did the ultra stuff, you're always running your intervals faster thing, so that whatever the long distance race is, it's going to carry over effect. Okay.
So when you were training, did you focus more on the intervals, the hill sprints? Because obviously it's kind of like a different aspect of training. Or what is it? Fartlek training. That's when you're pacing yourself and then you push past your pace, like it's kind of like a fluctuation in speed in order to kind of like get that chest burn. How'd you dial in on your training?
All of the above. Your year is broken down into sections, right? So if you're a distance runner, you have 52 weeks in a year. So you lay out your schedule, like where your races are going to be and whatever, and what races they are. And then your training is geared up towards, specific races. So you'll have your phase where you're running, your 100-mile weeks, like your long volume days, that kind of stuff, where, and every day in that week has a certain purpose too. So Sunday is typically like a long run. You go off your 20-mile run, let's say. But Tuesday would be like you're on the track. You're doing some intervals. So one day it might be 800-meter repeats. You might do like 8 times 800 meters. Or another week, Tuesday is interval day. It might be 6 times 1 mile, but it is interval day. Where another day might be for hills. Hills more for strength. So every day kind of has a purpose. Generally, I do about 2 hard workouts a week with either your race or a long run or something on the weekend, type of thing. Not that you do that all year, but certain phases there. So your body has basically, from exercise physiology, you'll learn that your body has different energy systems, right? You have your aerobic, you have your anaerobic, you have, and even an anaerobic have like a couple different types of anaerobic. So when you're laying out your schedule, you're not doing the same thing all the time. Everything has a purpose. Hills have a purpose. Intervals have a purpose. Long runs have a purpose. So someone who just does the same thing all the time, they're never really going to improve. Or if you're running too hard all the time, you're going to eventually break down and, get injured or sick or something like that too.
Okay. So do you train willpower? So when you're pushing these athletes, working them through your interval training and working through the progression to reach that event for a specific event, how do you train willpower in those extents? Like, how do you make sure someone's keeping up with the pace that they're supposed to be, like the goal they set for their pace?
Well, a lot of it is, okay, what was your goal that you set up for? Like, what race do you want to aim for? And what pace are you aiming for? And if they have, let's say we have that laid out already. Okay, I want to run a 4:30 mile. How do I achieve that? Now we're doing the workouts. Well, if you're not, that means when they're doing the intervals, let's say I want them to do 10 repeats at 65 seconds. Remember, so 65 seconds per 400 is faster than their overall mile pace goal is going to be. Well, if they're not achieving them in the workouts that I want to hit, how are they going to achieve that in the race? You know what I mean? So I may pull the guy aside after 5 of them and say, hey, what's going on? Like, are you sick? Are you hurt? Like, like how come we're not hitting that type of thing? So a lot of times it's not a motivation thing. The person does want, they're motivated, they're willpower, they want to do it. But sometimes it could be, hey, they're just having a bad day or a physical thing. And you may say, hey, you know what? Let's chill out today and let's come back tomorrow and try the same thing again. We're in 2 days type of thing. So that's where a good coach comes in. A coach can kind of, sometimes you're just looking at them running around in circles, right? You're not just looking around and running circles. You're looking at their face. You're looking at, are they grimacing when that thing is? They're hurting too much? Is their turnover slow? Or they're not into it. And then that's where a good coach comes in to recognize that, because it's tough to coach yourself, in that type of situation. I always say every athlete, I think, it has that willpower. They all want to achieve something. They just don't know how to do it sometimes. Or you may have a guy or a girl who overdoes it. They don't know when to quit. They don't know when to back off, when they should back off. And that's where a good coach comes in too.
And they start burning out a little bit. I've seen that happen. I remember the old traditional tough guy mentality. You spoke about it with like Vince Lombardi and was it Newt Rockney? You said you kind of embodied that coaching style when you first got into it, and it could lead to burning out for some athletes specifically, depending upon their personality and how prepared they are. But outside of the training, a big aspect with the sport, just because I've experienced this on my own end, is nutrition. If you eat the wrong thing before you go out on a run, you could be bloated, you could have an upset stomach. Sometimes you get a lactic acid buildup. What do you recommend your athletes to eat before they go out and perform?
It's always a tricky thing because, like I was a finicky eater myself. Like I ate the same thing all the time. So I was obviously with if you're running all these miles, carbohydrates is a big thing. So 65% of your meals should be in some carbohydrate. Doesn't mean you're eating candy because candy is carbohydrate. You want it to be a good slow burning kind of carbohydrate. Your fruits, your vegetables, your cereals, your breads, that kind of stuff. Um, and then you want so much protein, to build back up because there is muscle tissue breakdown and that kind of stuff. And then obviously so much of fat. But I try not to get into the technical end, like, okay, eat this certain food or eat this. I try to tell my athletes you need so much energy. So basically, it's about 100 calories for every mile you run. So if you're doing a 10-mile run and, you're a 19-year-old person, you're 150 pounds, you're 5'10", your body requires so much calories to begin with. So you're roughly starting around 2,000 calories. Just if you're just sitting at your desk and you weren't a runner. Then if you go out and run 10 miles, okay, you got to add another 1,000 miles onto that because it's roughly about 100 calories for every mile you run. Now you're up to 3,000 calories. Okay, maybe you did a little weight training session or that kind of stuff. So I sit down and I more go on what requirement is for energy. And then from there, the breakdown would be, okay, the 65, the carbohydrates, fats, proteins, whatever. And then from there, okay, this is what you like to eat. Like this is what your actual foods that you like to eat. Are they in this family? The carbohydrate, fat, like educate them there. So that's kind of what I educate them on. And then it's race day. On race day, you don't want to do anything different than what you've been doing all along. You'll see a lot of runners make mistakes or athletes make mistakes is they listen too much to commercials and this energy thing's going to do this or this is going to do this, and all of a sudden you might have found out when you went to the expo. You go to these expos and every tent promises the great food or the great this, and it might be totally different than what you ate all during your training. And the night before a race, you're going and having this thing because they said it's the greatest thing, and then you have an upset stomach 2 miles into the race because it didn't agree with you. So the biggest thing I do is don't do anything different on race day or 2 days leading up to race day that you haven't done in your training, all along. You're not going all of a sudden find the magic pill, You're just making sure you have enough energy, food in you, that you've decreased your training some before a big race because now you have that energy stored up in you and that you're ready to go on, race day and you're not going to get upset. Biggest story I can give you is when I ran that London to Brighton race, right? That was 56 miles long. I was in a foreign country. I was in England, London, and I'm on my own. So I had to go to their local 7-Eleven, whatever the heck that was, get my own little water bottle, put my own little energy formula in there that I brought, mix it up, put my name on there, and they put it out on the different stops along the way, right? So I was, totally relying on them to put this stuff out there. Well, 2 of those stops I got to didn't have my water bottle there, so I had to think on the run, hey, push through it. And then I got to the 50-mile mark, and I made a major mistake. I'm in 10th place at the time. I'm pushing through. There's these 2 guys standing there. They look like Monty Python kind of guys. They're rain jackets, whatever. And they had a station. They go, hey, mate, do you want water or aid? Water or aid, mate? Well, aid, I'm thinking Gatorade. So I'll take the aid. I drink down the aid. Well, it was like lemonade. It was like a lemonade. It was a real sweet thing. Well, this stuff is churning in my stomach now for 5 miles. We're coming down the last 5 miles of the race, coming down. I crossed the line. I mean, I had a side stitch there the last couple of miles because of that. I persevered. I didn't lose a place, but as soon as I crossed the finish line, the mayor of the city, little old lady, puts the medal around my neck, and I threw up all over her, all over her feet. Because that lemonade was super sweet, wasn't something I was used to, and it just churned away. So good lesson is don't do anything different than what you're used to doing.
Definitely. I was when I ran, I was a little underprepared. I didn't really do any training for the marathon because I just got done with shoulder surgery 2.5 months prior to the marathon. So I was like trying to say F you to my doctors and just say I could do something that you're telling me I can't do. So I didn't take that was a factor that I'm considering this next run I'm going to get into is I'm going to hunker down on my training and allocate my food a little bit better, because when I showed up, I didn't eat a big meal the night before. I ate I think I ate a pound of ground beef and a sweet potato, which probably isn't the worst meal ever. But I woke up, didn't eat anything. I drank 2 cups of tea, went to the race, and I was just I had hunger pains throughout the whole race, especially when I started getting deeper in it. And then I saw they had those the Cliff gels. I just started slamming them, and I was like, once I started eating it, my stomach just started killing me because I wasn't properly nutritioned throughout the process. So that's a big factor that I'm going to have to ask some more for your advice on when we get into it.
Main thing is eat is that 2 days. You load up 2 days before the big run.
2 days.
2 days before. Nothing that you're not used to eating, but just more. And remember, your training's being cut back too. So now you're kind of you're storing your body. Your body can store about 1,400 calories of glucose in it, type of thing. And the great thing about training is the more you train endurance wise, your body gets more efficient on maintaining that energy in you, so that you're not using the carbohydrates too soon, that you're using more fat. We have plenty of fat to burn, but fat needs more oxygen to break down that fat. So that's where the training effect comes in. To the better shape you're in, you can maintain those 1,400 calories of glucose in your body longer, and you won't hit that wall because you'll be using more fat throughout the run.
That makes a lot of sense.
And that's why those Kenyan guys go forever. They can go and this and that because they're running efficiently 120-mile weeks. Their training's there, and they're using a lot more fat in their run than they are the glucose.
Okay. So post-race, once I got done through the finish line, I put my hands on my knees and was like, whew. But a couple of days after, I was getting all the joint pains. Mm-hmm. What were you doing post-race recovery for yourself? And what do you suggest your athletes to do after they've went through a cross-country event where they're hiking miles, or when they go through a track event? Like a sprinter, his diet and post-recovery is going to be a little bit different than your cross-country guys. And then when you were competing in those ultra marathons, running the 127 miles, the 133 miles, what was your post-recovery looking like?
Well, immediate post-recovery, right? Immediate. So within the hour after you get done, the sooner you can get those carbohydrates and get that energy in you, the better, because then you're automatically starting recovery right away. So when I got done, the run around the spectrum, the 120-mile run around the spectrum thing I did, I got a pizza, So I just, ate a pizza, went to bed. So I got probably about 1,000 calories in you right away that first hour. And that's going to slowly be along the way. That's going to take a couple of days to kind of get that, eating well and getting back into. But muscle-wise is the biggest thing I find is I was fortunate enough when I did those runs that I worked for a sports therapy place, right? That was my field. And we had a tank, a hot water tank, where if you were getting out of the cast, right? If you had a leg cast and you weren't ready for rehab yet on weights, you would be in this tank, this hot tank, and you do your exercises in this 80-degree water, and you'd be strapped up, and you'd be, running in a hot tub type of thing. So okay. I would do the next day, you're real stiff. You just did 120 miles. Your muscles are stiff, everything's stiff. I would go in there for an hour or so and just run in this hot tub, the motion, and then would eventually work the stiffness out of there. and then I would go to a stationary bicycle, like the next day. So it would take me, I would gradually get to where maybe by that third day, then I would get back to running again. Take me a couple of days type of thing. Another way to do it is ice, ice tank, an ice bath. You've probably seen these with the ice bath. The ice bath works in a way because it does help with the inflammation. You're stiff because the joints and everything are inflamed, and the ice helps there. But what helps the greatest is, and I find is a massage effect, right? So you have an ice bath mixed with hot tub. So you go ice bath, hot tub, ice bath, hot tub. And it kind of makes like a pumping motion to kind of act almost like a massage in a way to get the blood flowing and helping in recovery. Because in recovery is taking away waste products away from the muscles and everything that's been broken down, and bringing in oxygen and bringing in nutrition. So it's kind of like a pumping effect that's going on. And that's basically what a massage is. But hey, who can afford a massage? Like you can't get a massage right away. It's a cheap man's way of kind of getting a massage type of thing. And I was a massage therapist for 15 years. So I'm fully into the massage. But if you don't have the aspects of getting a person who can massage you, that's the effect that you want to do. And the Finns were smart. In Finland, they always have you see these cold lakes, right? And you have these cold lakes. Well, they would have a sauna on the pier, right? So you sit in the sauna for 10 minutes, then you jump in the cold lake. Then you go back to the sauna, cold lake. So they knew what they were talking about. And they did that for years, that whole effect. And that's where recovery comes in, nutrition, and also getting waste products away from you and getting nutrition there. Real quickly, when I ran Atlantic City the first time, I never did a run that long, running down there that long in a race situation. I was averaging 7 minutes per mile, running hard for 62 miles down there. And I was winning the thing for 42 miles. I came in third. Next day I woke up, though. I go to the bathroom, right? My urine was, fire engine red. I look back first time, like, whoa, what the heck did I do to my body? Well, what was happening was you're breaking down so much red blood cells, in that 62 miles and this and that kind of thing. And your bladders, you're getting dehydrated, you're rubbing. So you have a lot of the red blood cells are bypassing your liver and everything to be processed and going right to the kidneys. And then the next day it was like brown, and it was like a light brown. Then by the time the fourth day, it was kind of like back to normal color. So it's, again, goes back to science, like learning about your body, what you're doing and what you have to do. So the second time I did the long run, I wasn't as shocked, when I saw that.
No, that's a huge factor because when I was right after the race, I didn't even eat anything. I was sucking down all those gels during the match or during the race. And then once I got back home, I gimped back home because I live right in Brewery Town, walked right to my house and just collapsed right on my bed and fell asleep. Took a shower. All right. So it wasn't that gross, but just collapsed right on my bed and fell asleep. But for 2 days after, everything just started kicking in because I was just so shot with my knees and my ankles, specifically the joints, because I have some injuries. I got a torn knee, and then I also have a couple ligaments torn in my ankle that I was just I'm going to fight through. But everything was shut down. And once I actually started capitalizing on that recovery, I went to the sauna 2 days later, and that sauna just, I feel like, pulled all the toxins out, made you feel incredible off the rip. But then I started doing ice therapy, and it was just I would do an ice, a compression ice sleeve on some of my joints, and then would just ice all the, my neck and my back. But one thing that I found,
you can go in a tub.
Yeah, we're in the tub or a cold shower.
Well,
Another thing was our water gets really, really cold in this house, so I was hopping in the cold shower. I've been trying to do that more often because it kind of gets you in the zone. But have you ever heard of the central governor in your brain?
The concept I might know, but go ahead.
Yeah, so I was looking into a few things at post race, and I was looking in how people are confronted with their wall and all those different levels affiliated with it. And this concept that kept popping up was this thing called the central governor theory, created by this guy named Tim Noakes. And basically, what it is your brain's response, both mentally and physically, for you confronting fatigue. So it's we talked about all those factors, like the glucose, your heart rate, your training regimen, all that stuff. And when you're in the realm of competing, you're able to have a higher threshold for that output. But when you're going those distance and you're malnourished, you don't have the sugar, you don't have the glucose in your system to persevere, your brain's going to put yourself in a situation where it starts fighting itself. It gets selfish. It's like, I'm not going to be able to do this. I'm going to fatigue. I'm going to start slowing down. When you were when you were working with the other professional athletes besides the runners, did you find them going into situations where their fatigue took over their performance? Which is a pretty general question, but how are you able to get them mentally to persevere through that fatigue? Also with runners too. Because the one quick fix I saw was like, you could trick your brain by like throwing an ice pack on the back of your neck. You could, like, obviously stretching helps. The preparation is the most important thing, but there's ways to trick your brain. And I was curious if you had any like life hacks or suggestions on how you were able to help your athletes out, push through that fatigue.
Well, I mean, Tim Noakes is a very famous researcher for running, that kind of stuff. I mean, he has a book about this thick called The Book of Running, which I have on my thing. So I just forgot what that concept was, and it is true. I mean, you set your governor up by. I think the governor comes from your training effect. That's how you can increase that governor effect where you're there. There's an old saying, right? Fatigue makes cowards of us all, right?
It's great.
So doesn't matter how tough guy you are, you're going to give in if you're hitting that fatigue factor. And that fatigue factor it's different for every sport. It's different for every sport type of thing. So if you're a boxer, and back in the old days, you used to fight 15 rounds, and you get to that 12th round, and you've been hit so many times, you're hurting, and then you just kind of give in to the effect, or okay, fatigue takes over, that kind of thing, and the other guy's just a stronger guy and takes over. Distance running is the purest thing I find, where you can really study that really well, because in a lot of the team sports, there's so many timeouts, there's so many catch-ups where you can kind of get back into the game a little bit, you know what I mean? In a tough football game or a tough hockey thing, hockey, you're only out there for 45 seconds. Then you're sitting down for 2 shifts, and you're out there. So, it never really hits you as much, I think, as the pure sport of distance running. So, for example, the 26-mile race, there's no timeouts, you know what I mean? It's just like boom, 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 boom type of thing. And then what happens is, it's not just an aerobic, it's not just a breathing thing that's making you tired, where you're accumulating the lactic acid and that's building up, that kind of thing. But your nervous system is also fatiguing. Your nervous system's being overridden by all these things, your aerobic system. So that's where that governor effect, that shutdown effect called fatigue, clicks into your brain. And then you're saying either I'm going to continue at this pace and I'm going to kill myself type of thing, or your body's just going to shut down. That's where kind of like, we always talk about that mental toughness, that mental toughness. That's kind of where I cut it, where that's what separates a really good runner from a so-so runner. You could have the same talent level, but that really good guy who maybe beats the other guy by 4 or 5 seconds in a 5,000 meter race. That could be the difference. It could be the exact same makeup, exact same body, but this guy, who was a little slower, just gave in to that pain a little bit, where the other guy was able to just override it just for a little bit of type of thing. The marathon is tricky because, like in a 5K race or a mile race, you can put up with it for a couple of seconds. But in the marathon, if you hit that fatigue level, it can go from, a couple of minutes to like an hour difference, because now you've just totally given in, or you're going to drop out of the race entirely. So when I'm training my guys today, my college people, again, it goes back to our training. You set up you make the workouts harder than what the race is. So if the workout is harder than what the actual race is, you make pain effect type of thing, then hopefully that's what you're trying to do, is push back that governor, a little bit higher out. So when you hit the race, you're not hitting that fatigue level, later on than what you were, before you got into heavy training type of thing. And then it's a year-to-year process. It takes a couple of years to develop.
You circled around mental toughness. What are in your opinion, because you have the exercise science background, you have the sports management background, you've dealt with all these high performing athletes and some very, very mentally tough athletes also, especially with Meldrick Taylor, absolute stud of an individual. What were the pillars to their mental toughness? Let's say we'll go specific. Meldrick Taylor, Olympic champ, world champ boxer. What was his pillar to mental toughness? Was his ability to persevere? Was his determination for a goal? Was it his lack of quit because he was just such a dog out there and had this like dominance factor where I just want to collect souls. I just want to break this person and own complete dominance in a situation. What were some for yourself, and what were some of the things that you realized for an athlete like Meldrick Taylor for mental
Yeah, there's only
toughness?
so much. I mean, Meldrick grew up in the same kind of area I did, so he had a lot tougher life. A lot of it has to come down with your lifestyles growing up. I think your motivation. So for Meldrick, for example, grew up in an extremely tough neighborhood, tough family, situation. I don't know what his whole family thing, but if you look at North Philadelphia and you go to some, there, it's not the greatest, place to kind of grow up as far as it's not a happy situation. So you go out in the streets, you don't know if you're going to get shot. You don't have the situation. So your toughness kind of develops from there. You first of all, remember we talked about you have to have that goal. So I'm sure Meldrick had that goal of like either his father or some type of mentor or something probably planted something into him that, hey, to get out of this situation, you got to do this. You got to become world champion, that type of thing. So that you'll see a lot with boxers, especially, they're just trying to get out of that where they are, and that's their motivation there. Where, hey, someone who doesn't have that tough of life growing up, it could be something where it could be a money aspect, maybe money's, they want to get more money, that kind of thing. Or just overall achievement, like maybe they had a low self-esteem. A good example of that was one of the greatest runners of all time, USA, was Jerry Lingren. You can look up Jerry Lingren's life. Jerry Lingren was like a little guy like me, always got pushed around in life, didn't know what he wanted to do with life. And his motivation was, I'm just going to get out of this, push in, that kind of thing. And he ended up winning like 16 NCAA long distance titles, that kind of stuff, just because he had a bad family situation. And his motivation was, I just want to better myself that way. So I think a lot of it just comes down to starting out where, your situation in life of where you are when you're younger, and then having the ability to set the goals and keep at them, whether it's a workout day to day or life to life. And that's what develops your mental toughness. You know what I mean? It's not some guy yelling at you and screaming at you and that kind of stuff. It's you setting goals out, setting, how you're going to achieve there, having the motivation, whatever it is that you look back and say, why am I doing this? It always goes back to that question mark. Why are we doing this? And that's what's going to push you through the tough days and the tough, situations that you go through. And, if you look at the chance of becoming a world champion, right? What was the chance of Meldrick Taylor becoming an Olympic gold medalist and then becoming a world champion? There's a lot of great guys with the same story he had, but he pushed through all those things, to get there. And I think that's the biggest thing. Coaching college kids here, right? And you being a college athlete yourself, everyone, we all come from different backgrounds, and we all have different motivations. It's up to the coach to kind of like pull that out, maybe a little more, so that it keep you focused on what your goals actually are. Because sometimes, you may fall off your goal, but you always have to kind of go back to it, and that's where a good coach or mentor or even yourself keeps you on focus, and that's what mental toughness is.
Definitely. So when I was looking some information up about you, I found out that one of your favorite quotes is from President Theodore Roosevelt. All right, and this quote that I saw, I feel personally it resonated with me on that aspect of mental toughness. I'll read it real quick. Theodore Roosevelt said, "Far better is it to dare mighty things, to win glorious triumphs, even though checkered by failure, than to rank with those poor spirits who neither enjoy nor suffer much, because they live in gray twilight that knows not victory nor defeat." What does this quote mean to you, and how have you applied it in your life?
Well, the biggest thing I got from that quote was, and I always kind of like it when I saw it, was don't be afraid. I mean, don't be afraid to achieve what you want to achieve. If you have a goal in life, don't let all the naysayers around you pull you down to, where they want to go. Because, I grew up, like I said, I mean, not that I grew up in North Philadelphia. I think out of 50 guys who hang on the corner, you always had guys hang on the corner. You only have 50 guys, and only a couple of us even went to college, and these guys would be like drinking their beer Friday night, in the back of the park or whatever. And I was all part of that group, but I wanted to achieve better than that. You know what I mean? So I would run around this park Friday night over and over again. I pass them, and they're laughing at me and whatever. Hey, you're never going to get anywhere. And you just had to have that thing of like, hey, I'm going to get somewhere, and push through. And I think that's what Roosevelt was saying was, maybe you never achieved like what you were trying to achieve, but at least you were in the game. You were out there doing it every day. You were pushing that kind of thing, as opposed to a naysayer, someone with a negative attitude, just wants to kind of, bring you down to their level because they can't achieve anything. They're trying to pull you back down with them, and you have to separate yourself from that and just keep following your goals and keep pushing ahead. Matter whether you're going to be very successful with it or not being successful, at least you're in the game and you're pushing ahead. And in the long run, your success.
Yeah, the first step to achieving any goal is action, and you got to put yourself out there and persevere through just taking that first step. Totally agree with that. So to wrap everything up, you've always been a man on the move. Where will you be, literally or metaphorically, running to next? And what's some advice that you have for people who want to get into running or want to build their mental game or even take on an aspect of coaching?
Well, it's biggest advice I say. Like I said, I'm 66 years old, so I plan on being on this planet, a number of years more. So never, I don't want to settle. I've been here 19 years at Jefferson. Our women have won 13 championships out of 15. Men have won 4. So every year I have a new goal. Every year, hey, let's bring in more athletes. Recruiting wise, moving ahead that way, trying to achieve. Teach them. My main thing is I'm a teacher, so teaching them how to get better and that kind of thing. And then hopefully in the long run there are championships that come along. So that's kind of what keeps me motivated that way. And then obviously, I mean, in my life, God was always like a number one, thing. I always had a religious, good backing with, with my relationship with Jesus Christ. So just staying informed with that, and that's kind of what keeps me stable as far as, no matter how many championships we win or how big you get yourself, you're really there to, to honor Christ and God, and that's kind of what gives us my basis to kind of keep going along and having a successful day every day of my life, whether it's a good day or a bad day, type of thing. So that's what I can, what little advice I can give to people that come in, whether they're going to be a runner or not be a runner, is everything we were just kind of touched on. If you have that ultimate goal, hey, I want to run a marathon. Okay, well now you have that goal, or I want to just be a distance runner. Well, start first. Start low, build slow. Like I told you, when I was 14 years old, I couldn't even run a mile. You've got your side hurting, whatever. You have to kind of have your goal, achieve it, and just kind of push through. There's no magic formula in running. Running's putting one foot in front of another type of thing. I don't think there's any magic formula as far as how you're going to get better. A lot of it is just having your own individual goals and trying to achieve them along the way. And that's the greatest thing with distance running. We don't have to rely on other teammates, it's up to us to be able to go out there and do it, day to day and week to week. And like yourself, you're out there with 20,000 other runners in that marathon. Every one of those runners had a goal. When they went to that starting line, they all had a goal they wanted to achieve, whether it was to win the race or just to finish the marathon, which is a great achievement. And that's the biggest thing I can give anyone who wants to get into this sport of what we call distance running is, just get out there and do it, enjoy it. It's a great way to get out there, enjoy nature, and take it day to day.
Yeah, that's incredible advice, man. I totally agree. Faith is power. And when you're able to persevere through something and have a goal at the end, that's an elevated purpose higher than yourself, you could achieve so much more. I want to say thank you for coming on here, man.
Sure.
This was awesome.
Yeah, just biggest advice, keep going. Don't give up.
Awesome.